Okay, so let me get started. First, maybe how I structure this. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Plug and Play, about our global footprint, and then I deep dive more into mobility and what we do in the smart city space. So here, Plug and Play. First of all, maybe a question: who knows Plug and Play? So I don't repeat myself too much.
I don't know if you
Anybody
see
knows us?
hands, but I do.
I don't see hands, unfortunately, right now in presentation mode. So you guys have to speak with me.
Do not know.
Or you just use the
No?
chat, that
Okay.
also works.
Okay, cool. So you know what? I'll just cover it from the beginning. Basically, Plug and Play here, we're the biggest innovation platform globally. We are in 36 locations right now. We're adding several new locations as we're going, especially during COVID. We added lots of new locations. We're over 600 people at this point, work with over 500 different corporations on a global footprint. And it's also very interesting how Plug and Play got started. It's actually our CEO, Saeed Amidi. He's a very traditional guy. And back then, it was like in the 2000s, he rented office space basically here in Silicon Valley. I'm based right now in Silicon Valley. I was traveling quite a bit back and forth to Europe over COVID as well. But he started back then to buy real estate. He had some successful businesses, bought more real estate, and then he started to get into the office space rentals. So he started to rent office space to startups, saw some great startups around. One of them was PayPal. And there was a very funny story. What happened with PayPal, and Elon Musk later, for example, they merged with PayPal as well, Peter Thiel and so on. So what he did there is PayPal, they wanted to rent office space from him, but he didn't really trust in the business model of PayPal. So what they did is they negotiated, and he actually got equity in exchange for rent. So 2 years of rent got traded for equity. As you all know, PayPal got sold for over $1.5 billion some years later to eBay, which was very successful. And that's how the whole Plug and Play actually really started. He realized that with his traditional businesses, that's mostly in materials and also real estate, he could actually make a lot of money in startup investments. And then he started to scale this up. Fast forward then to 2012. So basically invested in startups, got successful. And then 2010, 11, 12, more big corporations, like for example, Mercedes was one of the first ones, Best Buy, other companies like Volkswagen, they approached him and they wanted to get introductions to the startups because he started this co-working space where we are right now in Sunnyvale. Right now it's a little bit empty, but it's starting to fill up again. I was actually yesterday in the office. And he started to rent out this office space, I would say right now, but that was before COVID. We had about 400 companies in there. We're ramping that now back up. But then companies started to approach him and he wanted to get to know the startups. So he thought about like, hey, why don't we create a new business model around this? And we introduce corporations to startups. And then we use this feedback we're getting to do more investments. And that really kickstarted everything in 2012. And then we started different verticals. Now we're focusing on 3 different pillars. Number 1 is venture capital. So right now we're the biggest VC globally. So every year we invest in over 200 startups worldwide. Our ticket size is about 150K per startup. And now we're actually putting on top of these different verticals funds. So we already raised a retail fund. We raised a supply chain logistics fund. Now, me and my team, we're focusing on the smart cities, which includes mobility, IoT, energy, and real estate. We're creating a fund on that to do the follow-up investments in the startups. And then what my team also focuses quite a bit is corporate innovation. I'll talk about that in a second. And then we run over 50 different accelerator programs globally. Does everybody know what an accelerator program is?
I think it might make sense just to briefly touch and explain.
Of course. So a typical accelerator program works like this. The accelerator program selects the startups they think to have the most like traction or have the most interest and can really scale up quick. And then they invest on average $100,000 in the startup, and then they help them grow. We do it a little bit different because our approach is that we work with big customers, with big clients like Porsche, Mercedes, we work with Stellantis, we work with Ford and other companies, and they select which startups are getting accepted in the program. And what we do different is the startups don't have to give up any equity, and there's also no investment involved. So it's really a lot about the corporate to startup interaction. And that really helped us to grow significantly globally. And that's really like unique. And why do we do this? Because we see that big corporations like a Mercedes, like a BMW, they have troubles working with very early stage startups. But if we bring startups in, which already raised 10, 20, $30 million, it's way easier for them to scale up and for us too, to scale them up and bring them in full scale production within these companies. And I can explain that deeper going forward. Real quick about our investment portfolio. This is very interesting. So like everyone else, I mean, we had to shift our business model quite a bit over the last year. A funny story, last year, what was it? I think March 13th. I don't know the exact date, but we had our selection date. It's when we select the startups for mobility in our corporations to help us select the startups who are getting accepted in the program. And that was last year, March 13th. We literally had people sitting in the plane, flying out here for the event. And then COVID hit. I mean, it hit quite before, but then like the restrictions here in Santa Clara County changed, so we couldn't host events anymore. So we had to move this event from fully in person to fully virtual within 24 hours. We literally had people flying in from Munich, and they were sitting in San Francisco in their hotel, and we were dialing in. So it was a interesting experience, let's say it that way. So we had to change our business model quite a bit. But it worked quite well. And why I'm saying this is, as the business model, which I'll explain in a second, changed quite a bit, we had the best year over the last 12 months in terms of investments. In the last 4 to 5 months, we had 3 unicorns, which we invested in before. Unicorn is a company valuation over $1 billion. And right now we have actually 19 different unicorns. So we grew quite a bit over the last year. And on the investment front, it's very exciting times. So as you can see here, right now our portfolio, as we invest about 200 to 250 startups per year, we're holding about 1,300 investments. Currently, about 1% of the startups we invest in get valued over $1 billion. About 10% of the startups we invest in get valued over $100 million. And 75 to 80% of the startups we put money in get a second round of investment. Doesn't mean that they'll be successful in the long run, but it's a very good indicator that they're on the right track. And as you can see here, like a lot of them are not in automotive yet, but we started our mobility program in 2017, did quite some investments, and fingers crossed, but there's a couple startups there which are getting close to a unicorn. So we're super excited about those, and stay tuned for the news in the next, I'd say, 6 months to 1 year. I could go a little bit deeper into stories, but I'm just checking time so I don't go over too much. Let's see. So real quick, I told you already that in terms of investment, we're pretty successful. You can see here, that's from PitchBook. Last year, 2020, we have been the most active investor globally. We had 64 exits. That means startups we previously invested in exited and got sold, or somebody bought them or went into an IPO. So it was the highest number yet, with 64 last year. It was really exciting. We literally had like one every week, and we got a lot of good news there. So it's interesting how COVID turned out, that certain things, also in our business, certain things slowed down, but the investment front really scaled up very quick and very successful. That's it from the investment side. I'll deep dive a little bit into corporate innovation. In terms of corporate innovation, let's deep dive here a little bit. I'll brush through this a little bit quicker here. We're not only doing this in mobility, we actually have 17 different verticals. So as you can see here, with brand and retail, media and ad, food, insurtech, travel, supply chain, real estate, construction, materials, and so on. And in terms of mobility, we're defining mobility really in the automotive sector. But what we are seeing, a lot of the automotive players, especially in the startup world, are very much interested in verticals such as industrial IoT and energy. So that's why we are keeping those verticals very close, because what we have seen, and I'll talk about that in a second in terms of like mobility trends, over the last years, autonomous driving was a very hot topic. We see a consolidation there. A lot of the startups getting either bought or getting consolidated with the big guys like Waymo, obviously Tesla, Zoox, and so on. Really, Cruise, really like fighting it out now. So we're seeing this consolidation. We're seeing a switch a little bit in terms of innovation to EVs. EV technologies, a lot of startups kind of avoided in the past because it's hardware related as well. But I'll talk about that in a second. Just a snapshot of companies we work with. I'll focus here on mobility. Right now, on our different platforms globally, we work with about 80 different companies in the automotive space, which includes Daimler Mercedes. It's one of our founding partners in Stuttgart. Webasto, Nissan, for example. I mentioned BMW, Ford, Toyota, for example. Lots of other companies, and especially like the OEMs in combination with the tier ones are working on a lot of different technologies. Although I have to also say the automotive sector, the big corporations, I should say, are not the fastest. And now with companies like Tesla coming in, it is very interesting to see this traction, to see how like a company like Tesla acts with startups and with the innovation compared to traditional players. And I think there will be a lot of disruption happening going forward, because I feel like we have the front row seat because we work with all kind of different players and we see how fast or how slow they're moving. So like I mentioned, I'm right now located here in Silicon Valley. We're still working remotely, so I was jumping back and forth a little bit over the last year between Austria and Silicon Valley. But we have 36 locations globally right now. We're probably hitting about 40 by end of this year. And then different locations are focusing on different topics. In terms of mobility, we're focusing here in Silicon Valley. That was the first mobility platform. Then we started a platform in Stuttgart, then Shanghai, then Tokyo, and also just recently Detroit. What we want to do here in terms of like automotive, as I mentioned, the automotive companies, they're quite slow, to be frank. And what we want to do is we want to bring startups close to the headquarters because there are a lot of times there's a disconnect between the innovation managers of these big OEMs and tier ones and the business units. So our goal is with these platforms to bring the startups close to the headquarters and then introduce them to the business units directly, and then ideally they move forward to work with the startups. So now I'm jumping in a little bit more into details here. How did our mobility platform get established? That actually happened several years ago, say 2013, 14. We started our IoT platform. IoT is very broad, and companies like Daimler, for example, joined very early, Ford, and so on. And as we got more traction, and back then mobility was not a big thing, basically, in 12, 13, yet in the startup space, but we got more partners on the platform out of the mobility sector. And then we spun out mobility. It was actually a totally separate vertical, or still is. But what we then experienced is that a lot of these automotive players, that we have to work on a specific strategy with them to make them successful. And if we talk about technologies like autonomous driving, like EVs, everything product related, it takes them a long time to implement such technologies. But what we started to experience is if we introduce them startups, which are a little bit mid to later stage in terms of industrial IT, improvement of costs, for example, smart manufacturing, there's great technologies out there, then they can implement that quicker and they can get success out of those. I can mention one example, a big supplier from Germany, ZF, they're $40 billion company, and we worked with them for several years already. They have one of their first major successes with us, which is going to be launched. It's not public yet, so but it's going to be launched in the next weeks. What we did with them, we worked with them on a technology. We introduced them a startup which is tracking via video manual work, and then improves it. We can go more into specifics there, but basically we run a pilot with them together in one of their factories here in the US, and they showcased that this technology is saving them 300,000 euros per factory. So what they're doing right now, they're scaling them up in their 50 different factories, and that technology from the startup will save them $30 million, which is fantastic.
Awesome.
And that's really what we want to get into. And then energy, obviously, as you all know, EVs are coming. There's a huge change in the market right now. So we are seeing a little bit of a move from autonomous driving to EV technologies, as every major company is coming out with new EV cars now going forward. Any questions?
No, fine so far.
Okay. Okay, so here you can see a snapshot of the mobility IT network. I already talked about it a little bit, but you can see here, for example, Daimler, Denso. I covered them earlier. I can send you also the slides so you can have a look. But what we do with all of these companies, we run deal flow sessions. I can talk about that too in a second, how that works to really streamline their innovation process in the automotive space and to scale up technologies. So what kind of trends do we see right now? What we do in our accelerator programs, because our corporate partners are deciding the direction of the program. So we are not the ones saying, in mobility, we're going towards this way now. It's our corporate partners. So every 6 months, we're asking our partners, where should we go in terms of startup sourcing for the next 6 months? And that's for the accelerator program. And then we get feedback. And right now, we are identifying just 4 different trends. Shouldn't be any surprise. It's mobility services. It's really last mile delivery, lots of different services like Uber and so on. Autonomous driving is still very interesting because there's a lot of things which can be covered there. It's LiDAR solutions. It's also like the big fight between, is it visual or is it LiDARs? The Tesla does not do any LiDARs. Other companies or most other companies do. So there's this fight there going on. The prices of LiDARs have to come down in order to be competitive. So that's a very interesting field. But we also see a lot of transition towards EVs, electric mobility. As things are getting cheaper, more and more startups are getting into that space, especially like in the battery space, software stacks for batteries, full motors, for example. There's startups out there who are working on that and so on. And then so far, the most traction we're seeing, and that's not in the investment side, that's more on the implementation front. So startups we're introducing to automotive players, and then they're implementing that in full scale production. We're seeing by far the most traction in connectivity and HMI. And we can go here a little bit deeper so you can see what kind of subcategories they are. This is, for example, like from our last batch, what the corporations combined decided the focus we should put on. In autonomous driving, for example, you see here it's hardware sensors, mapping, software, data analysis, computer vision, processors, last mile delivery, and so on. In connectivity, and we see a lot of traction in that space. It's HMI, occupant monitoring, then gestures, V2X, VR, AR. In-cabin experience is very interesting. Lots of startups in that space. Why do we think this sector is booming? Because we feel like a lot of the tier ones and OEMs, now they're focusing on, it's just a matter of time, and there's a huge debate about this. We can talk about that in our Q&A then too. When is autonomous driving coming? Is it 2-3 years? Is it 10-15 years? Regardless, it's coming. We just don't know when exactly. So a lot of the companies, they're starting to think about how should the interior of a car look like if you don't have to drive anymore. And if you take the driver out of this situation, there's a lot of things you can do. So that's a huge focus for us right now. Then shared economy, car sharing, ride sharing, on-demand services, financial tools, car diagnostics is super interesting. I have to say, like car sharing and all the surrounding technologies got hit pretty bad by COVID because of ride sharing and so on. I think there was a shift towards like driving yourself again. We'll see how that's gonna evolve now post-COVID. So very interesting to monitor that. And also a very hot topic is electrification. So we're working there on EVs, HEVs, motors, range extenders, smart charging. We have a lot of charging startups, batteries, battery management, fuel cells, for example. It's still not off the table. My personal opinion is probably that EVs are going to win this. Pretty sure in my opinion, but there's some great technologies and fuel cells coming out. So right now, our opinion is that fuel cells are probably taking over like the trucking space. It makes a lot of sense there. And that the passenger cars will probably be electric. And then I can go on from here. But before I switch here, is there any questions about like the overall tech topics here?
Johannes, this is extremely interesting. I have a question.
Yes.
Do you see anything moving in the, water kind of transportation, like autonomous vessels, waterways? How to, or
Yeah.
are you really focused on cars?
No. So this is just like the overall trends we're seeing from, obviously in the mobility space, it's mostly OEMs and tier ones, and they're focusing on cars and trucks. But we do see startups in that space as well. Maybe real quick, so this is for the accelerated program. So this is focused a lot around automotive on the streets. But then we do deal flows. That's the one-on-one introductions where we focus on a lot of other topics. I mean, we're focusing also a lot on VTOLs, for example. And also we have seen several different startups who are focusing on water as well. I forgot the name, but there's like a very interesting startup. I think it's out of Sweden, who is focusing on electric ships. I can't recall the name, but I can look it up, which is quite interesting. And honestly, like water transportation, I haven't seen that much. We saw some, but air transportation is super interesting. Like we see, I mean, in terms of like what startups we see, like there's a lot of startups in that space. And then we could go further into that discussions, because if you consider like air transportation, there's the next topic, the next big discussion is like, I mean, for example, drone delivery and so on too, right? Amazon was in our office. They looked into like drone delivery options. They're building actually a whole factory in Seattle for drone delivery. But then the next debate is, how is that going to happen? Like if Amazon starts drone deliveries, how is the air pollution going? And then there's Elon Musk coming with a Boring Company who says like, this will be chaos. Let's go underground. So it's a quite interesting discussion to see like where transportation is going there. I think it's a combination.
Hi, it's Marcus.
Hi, Marcus.
I'm from London in the UK. The I guess the question which I have is over the whole expected growth of autonomous vehicles, as to whether there's been any investigation as to whether vehicles are being used by people as a transportation, or whether vehicles are being used by people as a form of entertainment. So, you know, there's this whole business about manual cars versus automatic, and I guess we're going to get the same with autonomous versus an element of the skill required to actually move this thing. I don't know, I'm guessing it's going to be at a niche market size, but do you know if the analysis has been done as to whether people are viewing vehicles as just transportation or as entertainment?
Yes, we did a lot of analysis in that space, and I don't think it's going to be a niche market to have entertainment in the cars. I think every car on the streets, if like first off, we'd have to talk about car ownership, and I think that's going to change drastically as well. I think people don't want to own cars anymore. Cars probably are getting more expensive in terms of like if they have like the full stack in there with huge screens, all the amenities. I mean, Apple apparently, like, I mean, there's a lot of rumors. So Apple is working on a car too. I don't think they're going to sell cars. I think they will offer it in a network, and the cars will be very expensive. But then you just book them for a ride. So there's, I think, in terms of entertainment, I think the car will totally change. Entertainment will be a huge focus within the car. So also be like you'll get in a car, you'll do shopping there, you'll get recommendations there. I think the interior of the car will totally change, and we get a lot of requests. For example, we did a session with Daimler already as well. How's the entertainment going to look like within the car? Because you'll have a lot of free time in the cars.
I probably got the definition incorrectly.
Okay.
So I know some of my friends have got cars which are very manual because they find it entertaining.
Oh, I see. Okay.
To tame the beast, as opposed to functional from getting from point A to point B. To the extent that some of my friends, in fact, I have a car which I go from point A to point A via point B.
I mean, I totally understand what you're talking about, and yes, this is gonna stay for sure. And I also see like from our perspective, the industry is heading towards EVs. From my perspective, there is no question. But if you're talking about like fun cars, I do not think that combustion engines will totally go away. For example, yesterday I had a meeting with a partner. you just bought a Porsche, like an older Porsche, and it's just nostalgic, right? It's just like if you sit in this car, you feel the engine and so on. And people will still want to do this. People still ride horses these days, right? It's entertaining, it's fun, but they're not using them for transportation. To say with the horses to go from point A to point A, and with cars, they actually do transportation. So it's absolutely gonna be here to stay.
Johannes,
a good example. Oh, go ahead.
Can I share this slide?
Yes.
Thank you.
1 second. Should I? One good example in that regards is too like what Tesla is doing. I don't know if you guys saw last week the new Model S Plaid got introduced last Thursday, and I mean, if we just talk about transportation, nobody needs a car, which is 1.9 seconds from 0 to 100. Like you don't need that for transportation, but they want to bring the emotions within the car. They want you to buy this and to have fun with it. So it's not about transportation for them. It's about like the whole experience. And yeah, I mean, I've been riding Teslas before. It's just crazy. Like, and it's a lot of fun. Do you guys have any other question in terms of like the technologies around mobility? I can also go into some use cases, what we have been working on in the mobility space. Nikki, you wanted to share something, right?
Just a question.
Okay.
How do you see the transfer between different sectors? For example, if you take health and automotive, is there anything, for example, that in the health industry with sensor captures that might define if you are in a proper condition to drive, or that can basically assess something about physiologically what's going on that you will find in the car in order to what's happening basically in terms of cross industry and how they are building on each other?
This is huge. It's a great topic. So health is also like some synergy we're seeing between automotive and this sector within health, because what we're working on right now with several different OEMs and tier ones is how do we monitor the people? First off, that's not so much health related, but how many people are in the car? Who is in the car? Is it a children? Is it a grown up? But then we're working on sensors, and it's crazy what's out there. I've not seen things like this before, but I tested it. For example, they have camera sensors now, which is on in front of you. And these sensors, they can literally detect, you just sit there, you have nothing on you. They can literally detect your heart rate, your pulse. Right now, they're working on your alcohol level through a camera. There is no attachments to your body. I tested it. I didn't test the alcohol yet, but I tested like pulse and the alcohol one is not ready. But pulse and heart rate is actually working. I actually have it on the phone. It's an app where they screen your face, and through like tiny like movements on your cheek and other areas, they can actually detect your pulse and heart rate. Then there's also like radar sensors and so on, which can do that. But a camera, I mean, it's impressive what you can do with a camera. And then that really helps to monitor how are the passengers feeling. It's very impressive. So if that's going to work, it's not 100% accurate yet, but it's really very good within the range already. And if that's going to work, that's a game changer.
Do you have any ideas about the consequences? What will happen?
In terms of autonomous driving?
Yes.
There will be a lot of consequences.
Yeah,
good and bad.
We always just hear some rumor and different studies and some percentage. Yeah. And for example, one what I reporter wrote last week, they say, okay, if it's happened, then we have to produce 85% of cars less. And it's mean dramatical impact, of course, in a good way for the environment and all the materials which you don't need anymore. Yeah, but for each company, producing company, it's a horror.
Yeah.
If it come out. No?
Yeah, you're totally right. We did an analysis in that space as well, and we do think that it's going to be less. We don't think it's 85% less, because you also have to imagine that these cars, if they're autonomous, they will drive 24/7, and they will break down earlier. Although, on the other hand side, you have to say like EVs are holding very long, so they can run 1 million miles, 1.5 million miles, and we see that there will be an industry in terms of like interior, because if it's shared, the interior will deteriorate sooner. So there'll be a lot of changes within the interior. So like, let's say you have the body and then you start changing like the interior every 200,000-300,000 miles or so. So you change that out. But I do think it will be a serious hit to the industry regardless, because the value creation is really going to be like the software. And the software will be where the most profit is going to be generated, not the hardware. So if you think about like an automotive company, they make $3,000 to maybe $5,000 per car. Mm-hmm. If you think about software, if they start like leasing that per month, and I'm sure they will, they charge them $200-$300. They do that for a car which holds 10 years. You do the math and you see who will make the money there. I mean, I talk with Tesla and so on too. I mean, they're saying like, ideally, we're getting out of the space to producing cars. Software is where we're most profitable. Like if they could outsource this, they will probably do that because they can make the money with the software. Once they get the software stack right, I mean, this is profit, right? You see the Googles, you see all the software companies. That's how you're so profitable. Hardware, not so interesting anymore. You need it, but it's not going to be the profit driver.
Of course, it's nice for the software companies. But if you have a look of the structure of the European companies, automotive car, I don't know, BMW or whatever, yeah, and see also the supplier structure in Europe, it's not a nice perspective.
Absolutely, no, it's not. It's not good. I mean, it's like that's absolutely not. So I mean, we're working with all these guys, and we're trying that they have to get into software. They have to analyze the data. They have to use their data. They can't focus on producing hardware, only hardware. You have to produce hardware. It's still valuable, but you have to change this because first off, they have a lot of people, and you want to keep that people. I mean, from my prediction, it's not going to be possible to keep all these people. You have to retrain them. There's no way that they can maintain this because they're getting in a cost crunch. If you see like a Tesla and how fast they're moving, and you see these big companies, I mean, I hope that's not too frank, but they're overblown with employees, and a lot of them don't have anything to do. They have to change. I mean, I'm not here to paint a nice picture for the automotive industry. We're working with them. I know very clearly how they look like and what problems they have. I'm here I want to help them, but I also can paint a nice picture for them because we have to be honest.
I think it's very clear that the future of cars will not be shaped by mechanics, but by data companies.
Yeah.
Suraj, you had a question. Would you like to? Are you still with us? Oh no, Suraj has left us. Maybe I didn't give him the stage soon enough. I don't know.
No.
You're here.
I'm here.
Very good.
Thank you. I had a question regarding the role of infrastructure when we talk about autonomy and mobility, because how do you value the importance of V2X infrastructure and all of the things that one municipality, for example, needs to deploy in order to guarantee safety and inter-vendor compatibility and so on? What's your take on this?
Yeah. I think it's very important. And I think that's where we will see the first like full-scale implementations in terms of autonomous driving is when in cities, for example, China. I mean, China's leading there by far. In certain cities, they just build whole new cities with technology integrated. And once you have that, you can actually roll out autonomous driving. I think this will be more like geofenced areas where they can roll it out. And then despite of that, I think in terms of autonomous driving, the highways will be the first ones, will be fully autonomous. In there, I think it will be in the truck space. We see a huge push right now. I'd say the last 6 months, valuations and companies working on autonomous trucking really exploded. There's many different companies out there. Too Simple, for example, we've been working for them with them for like 4.5 years now. They just got IPO'd, $8 billion valuation, and it makes a lot of sense. And again, if we talk about trucking, we have the same problem that we just discussed with Martin, that what are we doing with all the truck drivers? We have to start thinking about this because we will not need a lot of them anymore, and we have to retrain them.
What do you have figures to it, or just a scenario?
No, it's just a scenario. Like, I'm not going to say like, I think like we should transition them into like retirement too, because this is not going to happen in a year or two. It will be, I'd say the idea is probably 15, 20, 25 years, depending on the technology. When it really starts, we have to transition. And I think it's not the good thing. It's not like tomorrow they turn this on and nobody has a job anymore. It's going to be a slow transition towards autonomous. So we have to start thinking, what are we doing with the people? The people who maybe retire in 10 years or so, they won't have a problem. Because, for example, I mean, in the US, I don't know as much about Europe, but in the US truck drivers, they can't find enough truck drivers. So I don't think there will be an issue. So it will be a transition phase. But we have to think about like the future, because this is, I probably wouldn't, if I'm young and getting out of college, I wouldn't start the truck driver career right now, because they might be not here anymore in 15 years. So I think for them, that's not so big of a problem. On the industrial side, with the manufacturers, they really have to rethink. I mean, we work with Volkswagen and so on too. They're looking for 10,000 programmers, 10,000. And I think that shift, and I think it's also possible to train them. Like there will be a lot of different jobs created. So it's not like these jobs are going to go away and there's no more jobs for everyone. You can't retrain everyone, but you can. Like, I mean, right now here, there's boot camps in Silicon Valley, which trains you in 3 months, 6 months. Then you're entry level data scientist, a programmer. You're not going to be like on top there. But a friend of mine, he's working for a big retailer. They, for example, retrained a post delivery guy, and they retrained them for programmer. Entry level programmer is one of the best guys. He's a hustler. It does work. We just have to start doing this. And also, like, there's a lot of other things. If we think about it, if we think about it, like, it doesn't have to be programming. When we talk about maintenance of the autonomous cars, there will be a lot of work to get maintenance done with these cars and so on. So there's lots of other jobs going to be created.
You mentioned a few cases. Can you maybe share some projects, companies?
For sure. Yeah. So let me pull this up here. I prepared some here. All right. Can you guys see this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let me start with this one. Actually, that's pretty cool, because we can already talk about the name. This one is still kind of confidential, but I can hint some names. Okay, so I don't know if anybody from you guys knows what 3 words. It's a pretty interesting case study we have been working on. So these guys are actually from London. So you guys might know them. But it's a very cool technology. So first when I heard them, I was thinking, what could be the use case there? I can really imagine a use case for this technology. But then the more we got into it, it was more and more interesting. So imagine like a Google Maps, and they have basically a grid around the world with 3 meter by 3 meter grids. And they called this 3 meter by 3 meter grids with 3 names. And every grid is different, every little pocket. So what you can do is you can navigate anywhere in the world with 3 names to a very specific locations. And then when you start thinking about it, there's a lot of different use cases. I always say Uber as a use case. They don't use it yet. I talked with somebody from Uber recently and told them they should use this because every time I get picked up with an Uber in our office, for example, we have 3 different entrances. I can bet that they're on the other side where I am. So what I can do here is I can pinpoint to exactly where I'm standing, and the Uber is coming exactly to you. You can also do this when you pick up your kids from an event, for example. So it really navigates you directly to a position. And it's a great technology when you think about it. And what we did is as we're working with Daimler very closely, Mercedes, they asked us for some new ideas about navigation. And then we introduced them several different companies, and what 3 words made the cut there. They ran a POC with them, was super successful. That was 2017. And then 2018, they actually implemented this technology in a full-scale production within the car. And what it does is they basically use the Mercedes MBUIX, and you can then through voice say, hey, Mercedes, navigate to what 3 words, tablespoon tree, and you come exactly to this parking lot or exactly to this location. So it's pretty cool. These guys, I think in the UK, they actually using the ambulance is using these technologies. I was just reading in the news that they had like some great cases there already. And I think just yesterday, actually, I saw Clara. I know her. She's heading the company. They actually have now what 3 words for vaccine stations. So you literally walk with your phone to exactly where you get the shot. It's funny to the exact that location and get the shot. So it's pretty cool use cases there. Also, then when you start thinking drone deliveries, things like this, there's lots of other cases.
The UK, it's taking off because it's taken a bit of time, because on the face of it, it seems too simplistic that just 3 words. But then, of course, there are so many variations of three words, and people are finding it to be a tremendously elegant solution, especially as people remember words more easily than they remember a grid reference, or even a street address, which in every country is going to be slightly different. 3 words. It's such an elegant solution. It's starting to grow exponentially.
It's amazing. We have followed them for the last 4 years, and it's fantastic to see where they're going. So many use cases. I think in the Dominican Republic, Domino's Pizzas is using it now to deliver pizza because their address system is not good. So you literally shoot them over your 3 words, and you can get pizza delivered on the beach. And this is, I think that's an amazing use case because it's so simple, but though genius. And any questions about that? Otherwise, I'm jumping to the next one. Cool. Another technology that's an Israeli company I'm super impressed about is Noveto. And what Noveto does, they're calling themselves headphones without headphones. I'm having headphones right now, so I wish I have that technology already. I don't, but they're coming out actually with that desktop version as well, so I might get it. What they do is, imagine you sit in the car and it's directional sound. So you sit in the car and then the speakers, they're mirroring the sound directly in your ears. So there can 2 people sitting there, you don't wear anything, and you can hear what, for example, this guy can hear news in German, the other guy can hear music or whatever, and you're not hearing anything from each other. I saw the presentation, and I think the first one was virtual too, actually. I did not believe it. And then I did the demo, and it's just crazy. Like it does really work. And if you move, it's basically a camera detecting your ears. And when you move, it goes with you. And then if you step out of the whole zone, you don't hear anything. It's a fantastic technology. And what we did is we introduced this technology, Yanfeng. They're a global automotive supplier for the interior space. They were running a POC with them, was super successful. And then they got into contract negotiation stage there. And then they introduced it actually at the XM20 event, this partnership. And now they're ramping it up with clients in China though. So it's going to be in production in China, which is very impressive.
Amazing. I want to meet these people.
You should meet them. Sometimes they're at CES too. So they have the demo. You should test the demo. It's amazing. They're Israeli.
Can you make a demo so I can contact them either for a tour in Tel Aviv or for a virtual thing for XO1?
I can make a connection for sure.
Very good.
I'll connect you to them. Yeah. They also have like a German guy who's, I can connect to them. They can set something up. I think they have one guy here in the US, and I think they are in Tel Aviv. I think so.
They're in Israel, they're in Tel Aviv. In Jerusalem, there's
probably
not much happening.
Yeah.
Too intellectual, too slow.
Exactly. Then I have one more use case I wanted to share with you. Is there any questions about those two?
That's amazing.
This one is my favorite, most exciting one so far. But the problem is I can't really talk about it, so I have to. But hopefully it's coming out soon. So what we've been doing more and more, and I didn't go into details how we introduce startups, but it's basically a deal flow process. It's like a 3-month process, how we make selections of startups. And traditionally, we have been doing that with OEMs and tier 1s separately. And now we're starting to have OEMs and tier 1s in the same room. We discuss with them, we basically get them together. It's a little bit of a sensitive topic because sometimes they don't talk about a lot of things with each other, which is kind of weird because they're working together. But we're getting them there. And especially, I'll just say this, with newer players, it's easier. And what we did with this newer OEM and a tier 1 supplier is that we were running a deal flow in 2019. We introduced them 6 startups. And then they decided on one startup, which was exciting for both of them. And they ran a POC with the startup. It was very interesting, very fast moving. And then the OEM sent out an RFP in February last year. And then they have been working on the integration. The contract actually came in, when was that? In July 2020. And then they have been working on the implementation from August until April. And literally now they're rolling off the production line. The exciting thing is it's not just software, it's hardware and software combined within the car. It's actually in 3 different places within the car, this technology. It's in the touch space, like HMI, which we see a lot of traction in. And the cars are getting produced right now. And the funny part is the startup who has been working on this with this too already exited about 3 weeks ago to a big semiconductor company. So they saw huge traction, great success story. Unfortunately, I can't talk too much about like who that is and so on, but it's going to be a huge, huge thing. I have to be a little bit cryptic here because we have so many NDAs with everyone. That's a little bit of a problem in the automotive sector.
Thanks for sharing and not sharing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have one more case. They are so exciting. It would be nice to see one more case, but I also want to open up the floor for open conversations. Maybe there's one more thing you can share, and then I would say that we open the floor.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so in terms of success stories, that might be interesting too, to give you a little bit of a snapshot what different companies do with us. Daimler has been pretty successful with us over the last 5 years. They worked on 130 pilot projects to date, and 30 of these pilots got implemented. Hummel, you might know them. It's a filter company. You would think of what's a filter company got to do with startups. They're very active, and they do see that, 80% of their business is in automotive. You need filters for combustion engines. What are you going to do if EVs are coming? So their strategy is they have to get into new businesses right now over the next 10 years. And like I said earlier with employees, they have time, but not too much time. So they can't pivot right now and change their business. So what they're doing, they're getting in totally new areas. And to that point, I wanted to bring up this last use case. We're working with Hummel on internal entrepreneurship programs. So it's different than with startups. They're creating their own startups within their company. And the most successful one so far is Claire. So what they're doing is they're smart, basically air conditioning, smart air control within buildings. So they're getting into buildings. And I think right now they're so busy, they're actually hiring because of COVID, kind of lucky for them, so to say, because air quality is getting very important now. And what we did with them, they literally put a team together of 5 different people within Hummel. Everybody could apply with ideas. And then we brought them to Silicon Valley. Then they decided on one of the 5 ideas. And then they worked on this idea full-time in person in Silicon Valley for 6 months. They had milestones to reach. And the idea was to, if that is successful, to create a spin-off. And they did. After 6 months, it was so successful that they created a spin-off. It's their own team now. I think there are 6 people now. And it's really successful. They have their first clients going on. And it's a great success story to see. And the funny part is that big corporations are slow. So when you take these people out of their usual environment, you put them in a different environment, and we help them to scale. When you talk with them, it's funny because after the 6 months, they're saying, I could not imagine going back to my business unit. We achieved here in 6 months what we could do in 3 years within the business unit with all the hierarchies and policies and procedures. So they did not have any basically reporting. They got their budget and they operated like a startup. They had advisors like the CTO, Charles Violent. He's the CTO of Mann & Hummel. I know him very well. He's very progressive. So he let them do whatever they wanted to do basically within the 6 months. And it really works. It's fantastic to see that result. With that, let's open it up for questions.
Yes, it's open floor. I'm curious what you guys think. Let me remove the spotlight so everyone sees everyone. Johan, you're working a lot on this. Match your experience with what Johannes just said.
Well,
I feel like you guys will be in touch a lot more in the future.
Yeah,
indeed. And one of the things that I see a lot, as incoming patent applications is in the field of this how the car is inside, so the cabin or how you would call that area, with all kind of sensors. So the traditional ones is about detecting something useful, like is the driver tired. So this is now 100% precision with cameras and different alert systems that can be triggered, and more we see this patent applications from companies that I would never have expected, like Facebook, filing a lot in the space of cars. So I think they are also moving in that direction or something about this virtual reality experience of the driver in an autonomous car. So with that kind of headset, the Oculus or something, and so it's really an active area, and this is I would say one of the most active areas indeed, also in the patent field. Still, a question remains for me: how do you reconcile this entertainment with safety? Because at some point the driver still has to remain alert, right? The road conditions, because anytime a system can fail, and then you still have to be able at some point to react, right? So that's for me a bit the tricky part. Like, how far can you go with this entertainment, like to still keep that alertness?
Yeah, I think that's
interesting.
in the transition phase. That's in the transition phase, and I don't think like the full potential of entertainment is not going to be established while we are in level 3, level 4. But once we talk about level 5, the idea is that they don't have to be alert at all. And a lot of these technologies are already working on what's going to happen when there's level 5 here.
Yep. Yes.
I mean, so I live in London, and although I have a number of cars, I don't need to drive because our transportation system is so good that I can walk from my home within, I don't know, 50 seconds, no, maybe a minute and a half. I'm at a bus stop. I've got an app which will tell me when my bus is arriving. From there I can walk to the tube station, and there's a train every 2 minutes. And I can time myself to get from my home to the north of England, which is 300, 400 kilometers. And I can get there in 2.5 hours. So I'd be insane to try and drive myself. And I guess the reason why we're talking about autonomous vehicles is because we don't have good enough transportation systems. And what we have seen, which is being piloted, are people picking up a scooter, an electric scooter or an electric bicycle. Because the old days of having to pedal a bicycle, it was still a bit of a pain. So the more that we have alternatives to having to have a large piece of tech, I'm guessing the whole concept of autonomous vehicles is because we don't have a good enough alternative transportation system.
Can I just briefly chime in here? I want to say hi to Romy Siegel, who's also joined us in the meantime. Romy is running co-working space. She's a pioneer in the co-working spaces, so she's also very strongly related to the startup community. Coming back to Marcus, I think one important aspect is that you don't take one innovation and don't look at everything around this. Because when the car is driving on its own, the cars negotiate travel.
Yeah.
So the future will be you front of your door, you embark any vehicle that's available, and they will probably bring you in 90 minutes to where you're supposed to be, because if the cars negotiate travel, there's no jam, because that's very often the result of human error. But I don't want to hijack the answer, the question.
Well,
to you,
no, Marcus, for example, in our situation, we have a combination. Our test case is that someone is coming with the public train to our small village called Börchach, and then he moves from the public train to the next public, in this case, our shuttle, but it's an autonomous shuttle. So it's not a private car, but also the public transport will be an autonomous.
Yes. Yes, and thanks for that, Martin. I mean, I guess, Johannes, with the question here of transportation is we haven't quite grasped, I think a lot of people haven't quite grasped how enormous the question is as we move into saying, well, how better can we move individuals or groups from point A to point B?
Yeah.
And we're sort of going on faster horses at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree what was just said before. It's going to be a combination. I'm not saying like EVs will take everything over and nobody will use the train anymore, because then we again would have horrible traffic. If everything is EV and everybody drives EVs, then we have traffic again horrible in like the big cities. So it must be a combination. You go like for routes where there is no good connection, especially outside of big cities, you might use EVs. You might use the EV to go to a train to go from hub to hub. So it must be a combination of this and also of air transport, underground transport. I mean, Elon Musk just, I think, I'm not sure if they opened it, but I think they're opening the first boring tunnel connection in Las Vegas now, from the convention center to the strip. So it must be a combination of different technologies. Not one technology can solve everything. And I think it must be that EVs is a good addition to the public transport, but it's not the only one. It must be a combination for sure.
But the question is how big is the vessel and how big should it be? Because what we see in our case, small cities, a lot of public buses may be used for 50% or less. So and sometimes in smaller villages like where I live, maybe there's only one person in a bus with 50 seats. So
there's a lot of concepts in the startup world too, which are working on people movers, basically. Like a lot of them, what I've seen, I don't know the exact number, but it looks like it's a bus, a small bus for like 8 to 10 people, maybe 15 people. What we have seen, they drive autonomous. They're testing it on different campuses and so on.
Yeah, or maybe what might be interesting is also the robot taxi question, with maybe a car with 5 or 6 seats. No?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like interestingly, I think a lot of people don't know, but Tesla, for example, I mean, they have in their contracts that you cannot feed your Tesla into an Uber network, so you're feeding that into the Tesla network. I mean, it's pretty public that they're working on a robotaxi network. It makes a lot of sense. And then you feed, I mean, it would be, if that works, it'd be a genius idea. You buy a Tesla, you probably don't use your car 85 to 90% of the time. You go to work, you feed your Tesla into the fleet, you make money with your car, and you tell them, look, I need you back at 6 o'clock, pick me up. I mean, that's like, I'd do that in a heartbeat. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but this business model might be a real game changer, because a lot of people have money to invest. In Austria now, the prices of flats are increasing rapidly, and a car is cheaper than a flat.
Yeah.
It brings money. I think there will go a lot of money in this change.
It will
be
change.
faster
I
than
think
everyone thinks.
it will change a lot because I mean, now with COVID, we're seeing that people are basically like leaving the cities because to work from home. If they come back, that's more like in the Bay Area, and I know more about Bay Area, but like a lot of companies are not forcing their people back anymore at all. So they move to Tahoe, they move anywhere, and be here maybe a couple times a year, a couple times a month. And then if we think about autonomous driving, if I could, and everybody's used to work remote now, right? Talking about entertainment, it doesn't matter for me if I drive 1.5, 2 hours to work. If I'm in an autonomous car and I take my first Zoom calls in the car, why not?
Yeah.
Or watch a Netflix show.
Exactly, yeah.
Or something else.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about it.
People pay you to avoid pain or gain pleasure, and either way is possible when you just don't have to operate queue, traffic, jam, all that lost lifetime.
Exactly. And then, I mean, if you spin that further, we just talked about earlier about like how many employees and so will lose their jobs. This is a whole new business model because then you have this autonomous driving cars, and I can guarantee you that companies will come up with app stores with content you can buy within these cars. And there will be a whole new revenue stream, which will generate billions of dollars. There's already predictions there, which a lot of companies will tap in. And I'm afraid that this will be startups, this will be new players like Google, like Tesla. I'm worried that the old players are not going to get into that again.
I'm not sure about this scenario, because why should I use an entertainment in a car when I can take my iPad with me and do everything on it?
Mm-hmm. I think it's comfort.
I don't believe in this scenario, so I don't know what is the real point behind, so everyone thinks it will come. So
I mean, we work with startups. For example, you literally have a tiny convenience store in there. Like for example, you buy products. Then there's other startups which have games and so on. I think there's a market there. Maybe you buy better Wi-Fi. It comes with the car, and Wi-Fi sometimes is not the best. When you drive around, you get great Wi-Fi. Like there's lots of different opportunities, I think, where you can generate revenue.
okay.
Or maybe you bundle it. Maybe you bundle it with the ride. You book a ride. It was like, hey, this new episode of so and so, and they know everything already, about us. want a sneak peek of this new episode or something? I'm just thinking about something right now. But hey, for $1 more,
and then
you get access to this and this.
Subscription. Just imagine you embark any Uber that's a Tesla, and the Tesla will automatically be loaded with all the extras that are part of your subscription. Right? It's not that you carry the stuff with you wherever you go. Everything that you own or subscribe will be available for you.
Yep, it follows you in the car.
Your profile goes from bicycle to car to aircraft to wherever.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which then takes you into the whole matter of privacy and individual privacy and all this sort of stuff, which we're grappling with at the moment. I think universally we're grappling with my right to be private. Which we're starting.
I think that
there's no such right anymore.
Exactly, yeah. And I think we're getting used to subscriptions. I mean, if you'd ask me like 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't say like, yeah, I'll have a subscription to listen to music and I'll have a subscription to watch movies. Yeah. Now we have all of that stuff and it's normal. I couldn't have imagined that 10 years ago.
And also you're using a lot of services and never ever anything is for free. Right? Everyone is using GPS and it's a free service, but it's not a free service.
Right. They could also give it to you for free, so to say, and use the data.
Google, free service, not a free service. Facebook, not a free service. It's interesting how this conversation pops up, like the privacy issue, together with what people are exposing from themselves. No one's putting a gun on people's heads to expose their private life in that way they're doing it.
Yeah, privacy is very interesting. I mean, we have a lot of discussions about that too, because we work with lots of German automotive players, and they're very worried about privacy. And I literally asked a colleague from Tesla, like, how do you guys handle that in Europe? You collecting a lot of data with your cameras and so on. And they were saying, look, you either use our autonomous driving features or not, and you click accept or you don't. And if you click accept, you accept to all of our terms and conditions, and that's it for us. So they don't make a headache out of this. And we all do. We all have Facebook. We all have all these different apps where probably nobody from us was ever reading through TNCs, and we just click accept because we want to use it.
I must be one of the few guys, sad people, who did read through the T's and C's.
Okay. And I should too. I mean, everybody should. It would be a good thing, right?
No. And then I realized it is impossible to exit from some of them. And so therefore you just have to assume that actually we don't have the right to any privacy at all. But then and that's only applicable if I'm not private and everybody else is private, then there's value about knowing who I am. But actually, if everybody knows everybody in the world, then there's no marginal gain anymore.
Right.
And I guess we're still working towards that. But it is fascinating how you tend to find it's the manufacturer, it's the producers of it who have more concern than the consumers about the right to privacy.
It is interesting, yeah, because I mean, especially Europe. I mean, I'm from Europe, so I see all these discussions going on, which I find. I mean, I'm all for privacy rights if they're effective. What we have with the GDPRs over there, I think, is horrible. Because it's just a mess. It just creates a headache for everyone. It doesn't save anyone from giving up their data at all. Period. But I think we should have privacy rights, but it should be different. I mean, there's we could think about blockchain or so using that for that, and maybe even monetizing data for everyone. There's a lot of different thoughts. We could go down this rabbit hole too. But I think, I mean, at the end of the day, there should be a balance somewhere. But I mean, I'm not for Facebook collecting all the data, and so I think it's an interesting move. What Apple did, actually, I really support that they're starting to restrict Facebook from collecting all this data, because I don't think we realize how much data these companies are collecting. We're working with startups who are literally analyzing this data and tracking. I mean, it's scary. It's straight out scary what they can do.
At the same time, I'm curious how bad of a product Facebook is going to be when users start clicking this on or off the settings. Because it's a good product because of all this data mining. So once they don't have access to this information, how bad will Facebook become?
Yeah, that will be interesting.
Any more questions and thoughts? And also, I'm connecting everyone here with you. It's
great.
I think it's a good beginning of a conversation. Also, Martin and Johan, I feel like there are a lot of touch points with your work, with Johannes. Take it from there. That's what I always say. This should be not an isolated thing, but a new bridge to fresh thinking, new ideas, and reciprocal benefit of insights and works. I think this
for sure. Happy to chat offline too.
Well, I maybe have a question. What do you think about flying cars?
Mm-hmm.
You're involved in a project like this?
We do. I think there's a use case for it. Mm-hmm. I do not think it's something which will take over the mass market. I think it makes sense for certain, let's just think in, for example, Bay Area or LA. Hopping from San Jose to San Francisco in a VTOL is great. In LA, going from one high riser to the other ones. I mean, LA is probably the worst city to drive, especially here in the US. If you use that 5 minutes, drive from one high riser to the other ones, makes a lot of sense. But then we also have to think about noise. Like if many of those fly around, noise is starting to be an issue. And we're talking about like people transportation. If we talk about like package delivery, I think there could be issues too, because if let's just imagine Amazon starts delivering all their packages with drones. I mean, like the sky would just be full. I think we'd just be like the whole city would be something noise or something. So I think there's specific use cases, and I think it will also, like with people transportation, will be a combination of different things.
Yes, but it's less noise than if you're driving these things on the street.
I mean, with EVs, I don't know.
Yes, of course, because
Yeah.
you have a different kind of motor, and of course you don't have any noise from rolling wheels on the streets and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But this conversation is still caught up in yesterday's technology, isn't it? Because, you know, we talk about flying and we immediately think of noise because, so if I go back in time, there are some birds which can fly semi-silently. They tend to be the predators. So eagles, you can't hear them coming, you know?
Yep.
But then if you take a swan, you can hear that thing. and most of
that is very true.
Most of the aircraft we had are swans. We don't have the predators. So we are caught up with noise because it's noise. In the same way as, you know, we talk about roads being noisy, they're not. It's because our road surfaces and our tires are squeezing air, which is creating the noise. So we've already got road surfaces which are semi-silent, in which case it's only the hydrocarbons. And that takes us to silent vehicles, and then people don't like silent vehicles because you can't hear them coming and you get hit. But so they're everywhere. So I'm interested, Johannes, when you're looking at this, at helping people try to ideate the future, how do you help people break out of the shackles of taking what they already know and like tweaking it rather than helping them leap into, you know, let's have silent aircraft?
That's a very good question.
Go through breaking through from their constraints.
We have different tools for that. So we do like very specific events around that because when we do a lot of our work is to one-on-one introductions, and we're starting with getting the technology focus areas from the companies, and naturally that's already like in what they're thinking, right? It's not outside of the box. They're thinking a lot of times we ask them, hey, what's your problem? They shouldn't come up with a solution right away. So what are you looking for? What's the problem statement? And then we try to bring creative ideas within this problem statement. So that's one direction. And another one is we do a lot of events where we have this forward thinking ideas. In terms of like strategy, we are working with these companies on, there's this 3 different levels of innovation, right? So a lot of times we start working on the first level to really like, that's not a big change, but it's like saving some money because they have to get used to work with startups and used to get into this. If we introduce them to the 3rd level right away, which is maybe 5-10 years away, either we lose the innovation managers in between, the company loses interest in working with startups. You have to show results in between. So it's really like the steps in between, but then simultaneously start ramping up like the really groundbreaking things with them, the projects. But you have to do it simultaneously because otherwise these projects unfortunately tend to die within the company quite a bit.
Have you ever got to the stage, so in the past I was with a firm called EY, and we had some clients.
Very well.
Yeah, so, and quite often we would one of my jobs was ideation of change. Sometimes I go in and I'd meet the team and I'd guide them through a process where they'd say, actually, in all honesty, our company's a bit shit. Let's just give up. And actually, if you just give up, you're going to individually make more money for you and your shareholders than if you kept going, doing the same bullshit as you're currently doing. and the conversation started, how do we make more profit? You know?
Yeah.
And actually, no, that's the wrong conversation. The right conversation is, do you actually have a valuable purpose?
Yeah.
And then
I mean, you're just bringing up this problem which we're facing every day, because every one of the people we work with reports to their shareholders. The shareholders tend to not I don't want to say not care, but they want to see an ROI now rather than like in 10 years. So if they don't work in innovation, in a lot of the automotive companies this day, the traditional ones, they make good profits right now. Are they going to do well in 10, 15 years? Probably not. But the shareholders don't really mind. The management doesn't really mind, because a lot of the management is in their 50s or so. They could be retired by then, so they want to get their bonuses. So why should they invest billions of dollars in new technologies and have the struggles with what we mentioned earlier, shift employees? Maybe you have to terminate some employers and so on. I mean, it's nothing nice. There's nothing nice around this. So it's definitely easier to not innovate in the short run.
But the other question is, with this scenario, maybe you just need only simple social innovation or society innovation. Just mentioned the basic income. Yeah. So I think maybe the people don't need work, they need income. So, and if they have income, I think the most of them are smart and clever enough to do something useful with their time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they're
totally agree. But the money has to come from somewhere. And if we're sending all the money, like for software subscriptions and so to the Bay Area and soon to be China, they're not going to pay for everyone in Europe, for example. So we have to make sure that they
helicopter money in the US.
Sorry?
We had already helicopter money in US.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's happening right now. It's crazy.
Completely strange. Yeah. American and capitalism, and they make, I don't know what the exact amount was. I think $1,300 US. Yeah. Just send it a check to everyone.
Yeah.
And the strange thing was, I think there was also, 50 people in Austria to get the check.
Yeah, I was reading that. Yeah, that was funny.
So not me, but
yeah, I didn't get anything either.
we hit the top of the hour. Thank you so much for the insights and for sharing from your work and what you could share, and kind of giving us a feeling of what you cannot share. Very interesting session. I enjoyed it a lot. It's recorded. I'm going to divide fractions of it, so it's not a 90 minutes chunk to revisit. Again, thank you so much. I'll introduce you to everyone via email, and please everyone just take it from there. And that being said, I'm looking
Sounds great.
See you next Thursday.
It was great to see you all. Great discussion.
Thank you, Johannes. It's been tremendous.
Bye.
It was great.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.